Hello, welcome to 345 Tech Talks podcast.
Hello, Andrew.
Special episode this time around. We've got David Royle, who is an MD of SRM Europe, and we're going to talk about building a data innovation incubator or building data innovation into your business. So, David, hello. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do and about what SRM does, and then we'll start talking about data.
Yeah, certainly. Hello, Andrew, and thank you for having me. David Royle, Managing Director at SRM Europe. SRM is a specialist consultancy which has grown up in the United States. It's been very successful over there and now expanding into Europe. And we focus on a few areas, including data analytics and data science, customer insight, transformational change, and commercial negotiations. And I'm delighted to be here.
Great stuff. So. No, I'm really glad you're here as well, because I mean, just as a background for everyone, we are collaborating on data innovation, our two businesses. So we do, we do have an ongoing, rapport that goes for all that sort of thing. So it's good. It's almost like a welcome change to be just chewing the fat today and not really talking business too much. Okay, data innovation incubator is something that we talk to people a lot about, but in a sentence or two or three or four, what does a data innovation incubator mean to you?
Well, I guess it goes by a number of names, and people call them data innovation labs, data hubs, and the like. But in essence, for me, it is an in-house advanced data analytics capability, typically a multidisciplinary team who are working on a constant cycle of new ideas and applications of data and using advanced data analytics methods, typically following an innovation methodology with the right skills, the right people, right expertise, the right infrastructure and tools, but ultimately about developing a culture and momentum to embrace data innovation and expanding ambitions in an organization of how it can be applied.
And that sounds really good, because when we talk about having this type of approach to innovation, why would you have this type of approach to innovation, an incubator or a data innovation lab? Why would you choose that type of approach as opposed to, what other approaches are there, and why is that approach better?
So what often happens in organizations, just by evolution, I think, is that they will do data analytics in silos, in a piecemeal way, and have some successes and probably some failures, but it's done in a fairly inconsistent way, and it probably isn't realizing the ambitions that it possibly could. This is very much about bringing that expertise together and really creating a super team of data specialists who can really go after really exciting ideas and bring those different disciplines to a successful outcome. And I think that works so much better, bringing those different disciplines to operate as a collaborative team to get better outcomes than what they could do in isolation.
So is that because in a typical business, those skills are sufficiently rare that they'd not reach kind of a critical mass? Is that
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think people recognize that there's lots of opportunity within data, and often different business areas will have a analytical team, or they'll have an MI team, or they might have a team data scientist who works in one particular area because someone in that business has recognized that opportunity and wants to do something. But it's not a top-down strategic approach to embracing the potential. Therefore, it tends to be bottom-up, piecemeal in nature, rather than top-down, strategic and coordinated.
Yeah, and hence it's kind of it's advancing a strategy at a unit level, but it's not advancing the top level.
Correct,
the top level business strategy. And I suppose the other thing is that different business units, when you get into a department or a business unit, they've got their own data as well. And I suppose the other thing is that we always talk about data with the more data sets you have to gain insights across, the more powerful it becomes. But if you're just a department and you've just got a department's data, there are going to be limits to how much you can do.
And in fact, the exciting stuff is when you start combining those different data sets and different business perspectives to coming up with fundamentally new ideas and concepts. So that's why that centralized coordination, I think, is so important, to be able to think more strategically and draw upon that wider business perspective and the wider business data sets.
Okay, so in terms of this type of approach, then, well, I mean, obviously, some people are doing it. Who's doing it? Because data science is something that lots of people talk about, and 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 not everyone's doing it, but everyone's excited about it. But who's taking this kind of approach?
So, I mean, we've grown up largely within the financial services sector, and we've been working with multiple banks over the last 5 years. So certainly the biggest banks out there are doing this, embracing it, and have these sorts of capabilities. We've also worked with telco and oil and gas. So those big, large organizations, to a greater extent, are doing this sort of thing, and approaching this strategically. However, I mean, any organization that is data rich and data focused should be absolutely doing this. I mean, for sure, the technology firms, the social media firms
Yeah.
are doing it in spades. I mean, Amazon will have an army of data scientists analyzing people's interactions. But I think now it's sort of moved from being those early adopters, those deepest pockets, to now becoming something that is much more general in adoption, and second tier or smaller organizations are very much looking at how they can learn from those early adopters.
So, so obviously we know that kind of the big financial organizations are probably doing this sort of thing, and big oil especially, they're massive on data. So you kind of got the really, really big ones, and people sort of say, oh, it's okay for them, they've got all the money,
Yeah.
they've got all the resources. So, but for us, it's different. It's too hard. I mean, what would you sort of say to organisations if they're kind of saying, well, we're not quite big enough? How would you sort of say to them that actually this is appropriate, but you just got to
Sure.
think in a different way, maybe?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from what other organizations have done, firstly. So make sure you're maximizing that insight and don't make the same costly mistakes that other firms will have made. But ultimately, you don't have to do this on a large scale right from the get-go. I mean, we've had particular success in starting small and looking at a particular use case or idea, and then actually getting an enthusiasm around that concept and expanding it into a second and a third, and then ultimately setting up more of an incubator type methodology with the requisite investment in people and technology and process, and then getting bigger over time. But that's a growth journey rather than just going all in from the outset.
Yeah.
And
So
giving that.
so before you build a full incubator, you got to start with an egg.
Good analogy. Absolutely.
Just have the one.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then and I suppose the thing is, it's all about we don't just do data for the sake of it. You do data because there's value in it, and I suppose the thing is that if you can demonstrate that you're getting value, getting return on investment, that either you're making operational savings, or you are gaining more customers, or increasing spend per customer, or something, that if there's some financial benefit to a business by doing that, then if that's clearly demonstrable, then people want more of it. And
Yeah, a momentum grows, we find. So you get a few initiatives under your belt, and you invest a lot in sort of keeping people engaged in that process and cited on what you've achieved, that actually people start thinking differently and start wanting to apply this in their own business area. And ultimately, you can go from a nice idea to actually having a sort of a hopper or a pipeline of new initiatives that people want to take through the process, with a view to realizing value within their own business areas. And that's an enormously satisfying process, where it's sort of a nerdy thing done in the corner initially to becoming mainstream and becoming central to how a business operates.
and that's it. I mean, it's I suppose it's kind of a really a lot of businesses used to have like the suggestion box, where people have their suggestions, and those are kind of both good and bad, because it's great to get suggestions from people, but also you need to, if you get hundreds of them, you have to sift them, and then if you don't act on them, then people get disillusioned by the whole thing. So there is that challenge, isn't there, to demonstrate the fact that the progress is being made, so that people feel like their input and their ideas can also get into the hopper and feed through.
I think it's quite a careful stage management job, actually, to have that right combination of profile and business engagement whilst managing expectations. Because as you say, inviting too many things that you can't manage disappoints. And then choosing those use cases that are going to be most impactful or most compelling for the business, you need to find to get that momentum, to get that support, to then move into other areas. And so it is quite a careful program management approach to it, working out what is the pipeline of activities, what's the right sequencing, and how best to approach different areas.
And so okay. I mean, in theory, people know there's value in data. We know that if we can get to the point when we're demonstrating real value, then that breaks down resistance. But what are the sort of barriers you've experienced early on? What's the sort of pushback that people have, or the resistance that needs to be overcome before we can start getting to the good stuff?
I've always said there's 100 different reasons why not to do this, which are used quite a lot. But actually, they need to be challenged. I mean, usually there's conversations around data quality. Usually there's conversations around capacity. Usually conversations about, do we have the right infrastructure? But you don't have to have everything lined up to start demonstrating the value. And in fact, that individual use case can really make a difference working with the existing infrastructure, working with the existing business people or technologists to achieve a great outcome. And then from there, what's the next thing and what's the next thing? So, I mean, in terms of sort of general challenges, I think getting started is the biggest one. I think keeping people engaged through the journey is a very significant one to be aware of. But then at a more granular level, actually sourcing the data and extracting the data and manipulating the data so it's useful for the experimentation that comes. These are all definite challenges. I mean, they're all absolutely surmountable, but they are the definite challenges in it. Communicating what the data science has determined, the communication of the success of the program is these are all things that need to be carefully managed.
So, what would be some examples of really sort of good news or good wins that you've managed to achieve over the last few years?
Well, I mean, it really is a completely new space, and so I mean the opportunities are limitless. However, I mean we've probably got about 100 use cases we've worked in over our time in this space, but there's always a focus on understanding your customers better, analysing their interactions with the business, improving customer service, how to be more responsive, how to predict problems before they arise, how to identify new customers, more targeted marketing, cross-selling of products. So there's a very definite segment around customers. There's another big segment around operational improvements, how to do things more efficiently, identifying automation opportunities, how to identify problem areas and bottlenecks, and improving how the business operates in terms of its machinery. And then there's the completely new stuff that you just never would have thought of before, about combining this perspective and that perspective, or utilizing this data set for an entirely new product or proposition. And I mean, those are the really exciting ones when you've got an entirely different application of a data set that you hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, just like there are things that can be analysed now that previously couldn't. So we can analyse audio, we can analyse video, we can analyse photos, we can take a company's PowerPoint documents and extract some kind, break them down into what they're saying. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that can be done now that only a few years ago would have been real research lab stuff, and now
Absolutely.
And now they're accessible, aren't they? So
I mean, we've done a lot with unstructured data. So I mean, we've taken contracts and then analysed that with unstructured data techniques to determine the key clauses and rates and conditions, and then compare that to what's been invoiced and identifying where invoicing errors or billing errors have been made. And I mean, it had really significant bottom line impact, that sort of work, because there's all money that's been left on the table, hasn't been properly charged for, all upside. But I mean, that whole concept of unstructured data brings, it really widens the realm of what you can, of where you can take this data analytics.
And yeah, so in terms of the life cycle of setting up and this kind of innovation capability in data, and what would be the sort of timescales and the timeframes that you'd need to have to go through the stages? So we've got our initial stage, and then eventually we've got some kind of maturity stage when everyone's blasting away full speed ahead, and then there's some, and in the middle there is there is the bit where that is maturing. Mm-hmm. So I mean, what the sort of timeframes that you normally sort of work with to give people expectations of how long it's going to take to get to a good place?
So we typically look at one individual use case being a 2 to 6 week cycle. And so with a mature capability, you'll have multiple use cases going through the incubator on that sort of 2 to 6 week cycle, depending on the complexity of the instance. But that's sort of an individual use case. But if you're starting small and you're at that foundational stage, it can be a 2 week exercise. It can be a 6 week exercise to go and look at one particular area. Now, typically that will then become 1, become 2, become 3. But I would hope that after 3 months, you'll be at the next sort of stage if you've been through a few instances. And so 3 to 9 months might be that evolutionary stage of the data lab. And then 9 to 12 months, you can start moving into a mature capability with the multidisciplinary approach, multiple initiatives working in parallel, and that real emphasis on raising awareness and business engagement around what you're doing. But I mean, yeah, I mean, start small. It can be a 2 week exercise if it's something really simple. I mean, something that's not. I mean, it could be an afternoon. I mean, it's
yeah. Depends on what it is. Depends on what it is.
And really, it's really a question of getting an understanding of what's out there and what can be achieved. And it's amazing what the tools can do and what the data scientists can do and how quickly they can achieve it. But then clearly, there's more complicated ones that are going to take longer.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? That as soon as things become data science, they become quite scary to a lot of people. And it's just reiterating the fact that what we're talking about, it could be a couple of thousand rows of data dumped out into a CSV file, and you might be able, and there's things you can do with that, just with a bit of Python.
Absolutely.
That can actually yield some amazing insights. You could give a few details on your customer list, and then suddenly find you've been able to cluster those customers into various categories, and you understand them a lot better. And that could, like I say, that could happen in an afternoon.
Indeed, absolutely right. It's getting started. That's the key.
It's getting started. It's like with exercise. The hardest part is getting through the door of the gym. Once you're there, it's okay. You just got to do. You just got to do the stuff. You just got to do the work. But sometimes getting through the door is the hardest part. So so when you're finding this, so we want to find these first use cases, these first scenarios. I mean, how easy is it to find the appropriate ones? Because everyone gets excited and wants to shoot for the moon and that sort of thing. How do you? But to start with something small, demonstrates value quickly. How do you find those small ones so you can build?
Yeah, I mean that is I think quite an art form. Finding that combination of being manageable but also impactful, and it may be a case of actually let's do something quite simple just to get going, and it's not going to change the world, but actually is just a way of engaging with it. I mean, we have sort of different themes running through our incubators, whereby it might be revenue optimization, or it might be particular alignment to an inherent strategy within the business. And then when you start sort of, I need something which can have maximum return on investment aligned to our geographic expansion in Europe or whatever it might be, it can be quite challenging. And then actually that process of working with the business to generate new ideas is quite an involved one. And it's a combination of showing the business what could be achieved, but then getting them to think more creatively around what they could do. Often business people who aren't familiar with data will be thinking dashboards and efficiency improvements rather than something much more transformational or fundamental about what can be done. So that's definitely a process of sharing the art of the possible and then exploring where the issues might be and then seeing what can come out of that.
It is, because there are a lot of people who, I mean, I put analytics into 3 categories, and so you've got, people can generally get their head around reports. And my car analogy for this is that, the reports are like looking in your rearview mirror. You know where you've been, but it's and it kind of helps you understand what's happened in the past. And then the dashboards are like the dashboard in your car, the speedometer, the tachometer. They're telling you what's happening right now, and that's also a really useful thing. But what's also important is to look through the windscreen and sort of see what's coming up in the future, and that's where, those are some of the most exciting opportunities of analytics now, is the predictive analytics that tell you where the future's going, because you then have time to take action to make things happen based on what's coming up.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, with some of the predictive work we've been involved in, there's been sort of predicting where complaints are going to come for that business in the future by analysing what's happened historically, but then finding a mechanism for then determining what are the root causes of those complaints and then applying that to the future application of the business. And then you can start seeing where future complainants are going to come from. So what can you do to avoid that future complaint ever happening? And I mean, that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of another. It reminds me of another funny thing we found. One of the customers we've worked with, who are a well-known organisation. They know when their website's got issues by monitoring Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because people start tweeting about, I can't log in, and sometimes they know about their website having issues from Twitter before they get it from their actual own system logs, which is just an incredible thing. I mean, obviously you've got to have that scale of usage to do that, but it's an amazing, and that was an amazing kind of unexpected way of doing something based on a different data set that no one had thought to use before.
And you're making another good point about the use of external data sets. So I mean, there's many ways of enriching your own data by using a feed from Twitter or similar to actually enrich what you have and get that customer feedback far more directly and quickly than you could ever achieve in your own systems, and looking at complaint data or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and if you're, for example, if you're a retailer, you can actually get data sets from Google, because Google will sell anonymized data of footfall and the demographics of people that are going, that are going around particular retail areas. You can buy that data. Absolutely. And it's amazingly rich and amazingly detailed, and it's all been anonymized, so it's not, it hasn't got any particular person's thumbprint on it. But that sort of data is just so, it's so rich, so powerful. But again, you've got to know these things are out there, because a lot of people just look inside their business and say, oh, I've got this, I've got that system there with that data and that data and that data. But then, you can overlay that with traffic data or weather data or, all sorts of outside data, and actually build your picture up as a composite of the two.
No, I'd agree. I was just reflecting on the things that you thought are hardest. There's one I forgot to mention, which is probably worth mentioning, is around corporate politics and data ownership.
Ooh.
Which is a bit of a gritty one.
Yeah.
But certainly,
I'm gonna have a sip of tea. That was so hard.
Okay. I mean, what we have found is that there is often quite a lot of resistance to provide data sets to an internal project team to do stuff, and there's a lot of power and control within a data set. Knowledge is power, is being the concept, and actually having the strategic influence to require different data sets to be provided for this wider corporate purpose, and why you should have a centralized team is also a key way of sort of navigating that inherent human behavior of of protecting your own part of the business, your own particular fiefdom.
Yeah, because I suppose I mean, because at the start of it you mentioned the kind of, this is a top-down approach, and I think that's where, I'm the sort of person that naturally kind of thinks that bottom-up stuff's good because it's sort of organic, and a lot of the grandiose top-down projects are doomed to fail. And which kind of leads us on to a couple of things about this, but the point you're making here about the top-down thing is that it's that permission to use the data has to come from the top, because if you're beavering away in one department and then you go to Bob over there and say, hey, can I have all your data?
Yeah, no.
Like,
I agree, and I think it's a hybrid top down and bottom up. So this starting small is about sort of working from a bottom up perspective, but with a strategic alignment and sight of what's being achieved, with a more strategic intent behind that bottom up approach.
Yeah, because that's right. Because the strategic part is the capability.
Sure.
But what you feed into the hopper can be the bottom up stuff. And there is an interesting kind of bit in the middle, because as you go along, because you talked before about the fact that with the data sets, you've got all these data sets, some of them are in varying degrees of quality. And so as you go along, you're cleaning up these data sets and you're putting feeds in to feed a central location. And over time, those problems get sorted out, and you end up with a bigger and bigger and richer set of data that kind of builds up, so that it's not buried in a department or buried in a silo. It's somewhere that can be accessed, and it's clean, and it's the right format and that sort of thing. So there's a sort of there's the bottom up ideas, and then there's the top down capability, and then there's this bit in the middle which is actually building up data as an asset. It's actually kind of taking data as the raw data and actually making an asset out of it, isn't it, ultimately?
I mean, I think it's about realizing value from your data assets, as you say, and a lot of firms have spent quite a large amount of money in those data assets, be it GDPR requirements or BCBS 239 requirements or wider infrastructure investment. So they've spent a lot of money on this asset already, but haven't got much return from it, and it's underutilized and it's still not trusted. And actually finding the mechanism for getting people to start working far more proactively with those underlying data assets that the firm has invested in, I think is really key.
And I mean, one of the other things, because when you get onto that thing about people who invested a lot of money, because again, how much have people spent on IT over the last 10, 20 years? I mean, it can be vast sums of money, but what are the sort of budgetary, financial decisions that people are looking at? Because obviously we are trying to find out things from data and build this data capability. So there's going to be a certain amount of investment there, and then you gain insights, and they have to, unless you get some insights and you actually action them and make operational changes or organizational changes or product changes or whatever it is on the back of that, then so there still needs to be an ongoing, even though you're realizing value, you still there is still investment. So I mean, how do those conversations go about ongoing investment and where how much how much you need to invest to make the changes that your insights are telling you will bear fruit?
And I think this is an extension of that sort of stage management approach to this, that you've got to recognize where there's going to be additional costs to achieve certain outcomes, where there's going to be return on investment made, and actually almost taking sort of a cash flow approach to your data investment. So when are you going to when can you do certain things, and when will it require a significant uplift in the infrastructure to do those certain things? And are there things you can do earlier that don't require that big investment and can be done more cheaply, yet still build that confidence and be directionally correct? But I mean, there's a number of different areas to the costs associated with this. I mean, there's certainly the infrastructure aspect, and everyone's pretty familiar with that, and a lot of people are well down that journey already. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that data science skill sets are quite expensive to recruit. These are people
Yeah,
who are in demand, and therefore salaries are associated with that.
and they get bored quickly as well.
Oh, the cultural side is really significant. I mean, if you're trying to get
Yeah,
data scientists from who are currently working in LinkedIn or Google or whatever it might be, and I don't want to choose a wrong example here, but you haven't got the most dynamic of images as a business, it can be quite a challenge to get those people you want into your organization. And we spent quite a lot of time sort of developing the cultural side of working in the organization, sort of the ways of working, but also the career development, and also how to make it really exciting for them. So sort of links with academia and aspects like that, which are really valued by that community, who want to stay very current and very relevant, and want to be working with like-minded individuals. So I think these are all very important aspects, and on the softer side, associated with what is quite a technical area.
and that in itself is a like you say, you know that if you went to work for Google, you know that pretty much they let you work from wherever you want,
Yeah.
and you can organize your time, and you've got, you know, they get very good people, so that you know that there's going to be good people, and trying to actually, like you say, trying to actually say no, come and work for us instead is yeah, there has to be a really good reason to attract to attract good people. So and just sort of saying, well, come to us and we'll make you turn up at an office in a suit every day,
Yeah.
and but you've got to be here by 9.
But
At
I mean, there's other things
5:30,
you
you're
can
allowed to
do.
go home.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's the highlight. Yeah, indeed. But I mean, perhaps the autonomy is a key aspect, and the ability to work on interesting and new areas, or abilities to network with different academic institutions or similar like that, are all highly valued by people in this space. So I think there's ways of navigating around that, but recognizing that you need to do things to get the right combination of people and process and procedure here.
Yeah, and well, and as everyone knows, when it comes to business, it all ends up being all about people, because you can have great ideas, but unless you've got good people who are bought in and know what the vision is, and want to actually drive it, you never get anywhere. So I'm glad you mentioned the people side of it, because that is it's such a critical part of everything we do.
I mean, we shouldn't just focus on sort of the data scientists either, because when I say a multidisciplinary team, when you may have your rock star data scientists involved, but I mean, there's data engineering responsibilities in here. There's agile project management responsibilities in here. There's communication specialists, there's visualization skills, and I mean, I'm talking about a mature operation here, which would be much more multidisciplinary in nature. But it isn't all about those who've got PhDs in maths, etc., to do this stuff. There's a whole portfolio of expertise that will constitute the right team. And what we typically do is we will look for those different skills within an organization who are already there, and look to bring them together and perhaps supplement where there's some gaps within the organization of how they can do this, but with a view to either developing the in-house resources or helping them to recruit and secure permanent resources, so they have a fully capable ongoing team that isn't reliant on third-party help on an ongoing basis.
And I suppose that again is also a really powerful thing, because what people, if you are going to get people in to help you with data science and data innovation, one of the kind of the warning bells is these people are really expensive, and I'm going to be reliant on them forever. And yet what your approach is doing is it's saying, we'll help you build your capability, and then we can walk away, rather than we'll build a capability that we own, and we've got you over a barrel forever. It's
Indeed. And
and
we
I
know
think
there's some fairly unscrupulous organisations out there who will try and maximise an engagement for as long as possible, and you just become reliant on them, and then you're beholden to them. But this is very much about thinking about the life cycle of the incubator, and thinking about, okay, so how do we get from now to us leaving, the last person leaving, and what is the transitional roles, and how do we help you find the right people to fill those roles, or how do we train someone up to take over that role through shadowing, etc., en route. But it's a very deliberate process of looking at that resource management and working out how to do yourselves out of a job effectively over a period of time.
That's fantastic stuff. So I'm just conscious of the time. I know we've had a great chat here and covered a lot of ground in a short space of time. I mean, I think to sum up from my side, I think the main points I think we covered are that that there is value in data. Everyone knows there's value in data. Just start somewhere, start small, and then build from there. I think are the key things. But is there any other things from you that you kind of feel like we really need to call out?
I mean, I think finding that initial idea is key. I mean, get started, yes, but you want to get started with something that is useful. And we're more than happy to kick ideas around what might be possible and what might have potential, with a view to that being that initial use case that is going to build into something far greater. But more than happy to explore and talk through previous use cases that we've worked on that might be applicable to your organisation.
Yeah, so they're not new for you, but they're new for this for another organisation that may want to work with you. And it's the same thing with when we do data strategy. I mean, we can do data strategy, but from a slightly more technology focused angle. But when people are sort of saying, well, what do we want to do with the data strategy? If they're all scratching their heads and don't know where to do, well, we sort of say, well, here's our list of 100 things we've done before.
Yeah.
Which of these suit you? So we do. I think everyone has that kind of thing that you bring that experience with you.
Indeed.
And then other people benefit from it, and hopefully the world becomes a better place as a result.
Indeed.
So David, well, if people want to talk further about this, how do they find you?
Well, either through yourself, Andrew, or email me, David Royle at srmeurope.com, and I'll be delighted to chat.
And as simple as that. So yeah. So if you're interested in data, you're interested in getting more value for your business out of data, get in touch with David, and he'll tell you how to do it. I think that's
David Royle, Royle. Should have mentioned that.
Okay. Well, David, it's been fantastic. I think we need to wrap up because we're just about out of time. But thanks very much for being on the podcast today, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Enjoyed it.